Hello, real estate investing fools. So, one of the things that I think is most interesting for investors right now is this kind of trend of digital nomadism. Seems like a pandemic trend with the rise of remote work, but actually we're seeing it. I've seen it grow on a smaller scale and it just keeps growing. So that's one of the reasons I'm excited to talk to Jason Fudin today of WhyHotel, which is a hospitality platform and operator with a focus on multifamily buildings. Got a really interesting idea. Creates pop-up hotels by designing curated spaces that can be booked like a hotel for one night or longer. So it kind of ties into that idea of true flexibility. So welcome, Jason.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, let's talk about this because you call your spaces pop-up hotels. What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so we call them pop-ups because they're temporary. And the way it works is when a developer builds a high-rise apartment building, they deliver all the units at once and empty. And so we take 100 or more units, we furnish them during construction. And then during that building's lease up, when it's filling with renters, we run a hotel out of the vacancy. And our customers get to stay in brand new luxury apartments in lieu of traditional hotel rooms or vacation rentals.
So they're fully furnished, right?
Yeah. They're turnkey. So you show up in what feels like the nicest apartment you've ever been to, not like someone's been living there. And then, the high-speed internet, all the housewares, you could cook a massive meal. You could just never use the stove like most people. You could go for a run and use the washer dryer. It's a turnkey home experience. And then the reason they're pop-ups is that after a year or so, as the building fills with renters, we wind down and move on to the next one.
Interesting. Okay, so this is only for new buildings.
Yeah, so our pop-up product is just for new buildings. We have a permanent product called Hospitality Living, where we run buildings as a mix of furnished and unfurnished stays on a forever basis. And the renters get hospitality services while they live there. So they can opt into linen service, cleaning service, wash and fold. And then our guests in the furnished units get to be part of a community and, again, get a turnkey home-like stay when they're traveling.
Interesting. So you work with multifamily operators then. How do they find you and how do you find them?
Yeah, so we work with multifamily developers, operators, investors. At this point in time, we're about 4 years old, which I guess makes us an infant in the company world, but it feels like it's been a long 4 years. And over that time, we've built relationships with probably 800 or 900 development shops across the United States. And so as real estate developers look at building new buildings, they reach out to us and say, hey, is this something that would fit with your model? We'd love to bring you guys in, improve the resident experience during our lease up and also, make use of otherwise underutilized inventory.
Interesting. So as the building gets leased up, your space in it sort of gets smaller and smaller over time?
Yeah. So we'll, like a 300 unit building, we'll ramp up to 140 units in the first 60 days. We'll be at 140 units for like 6-7 months. And then eventually the renters catch us. So we start handing back 20 or 30 units a month until eventually it just doesn't make economic sense to run. And that process is about a year on average.
In that case, that means your inventory is always changing. Your offerings are always changing. So is it sort of this thing where you go on to WhyHotels and then you find out what's available right now and it sort of changes over time?
Yeah. So for the pop-ups, that's totally right. On an annual basis, you're going to see some change of inventory. Right now we have stuff in Midtown Miami. We have some stuff in Northern Virginia, downtown DC. There's some more coming. And then that'll evolve as we open pop-ups and we close them down. And then on the permanent stuff, it's always there. So, if you stayed with us in West End in DC, that property is going to be there in perpetuity. And so, yeah, it's a mix. Some of it comes and goes. Although the pop-up, the one nice thing is it's always new. It's not like it was recently new. It is always very new. So, it's a reflection of the times. They're beautiful spaces. And we try to do a good job of bringing that community feel into the building. And when they're new buildings, you have a lot of opportunity to do that. Because every year you get to do another shot at it, right? You didn't make a decision 10 years ago and you're living with it. Every year you get to, as new businesses open or new groups make progress in communities, you're able to fold them right into the asset. We do that with local artists. We do that with the restaurants we partner with, which is a lot of fun.
It does sound like fun. So what happens to the furniture in each of the units as you gradually turn them over, do you then have to come in and have movers that then take that furniture to another place?
Yeah, or it just goes back to our partners. So a lot of the furniture is hospitality grade, brand new rented furniture. So our partners do is they buy new furniture, they place it in our buildings. And then as the pop-ups wind down, we either move it over to new buildings or it goes back to them and they then rent it out to others as used furniture. It's kind of served its purpose with us, and then, it has terminal value for them.
Oh, cool. So how are you determining where your next location will be?
So there's a bunch in the works. We basically look for buildings where we can create real value for our partners. And then once we're in a market, we try to stay in it. So like we start in the DC market, we'll perpetually be in the DC market. We opened in Miami in May. We'll be in the Miami, South Florida market in perpetuity. And there's a couple more markets we're going to open shortly. And as we announce those, we'll just continue to double down in those markets. Because as you build a team there and a set of customers, our guests may not be staying in the same building. But if they stayed with us in one place in an area, and they enjoyed themselves, they're likely going to be looking for, what beautiful new building can I stay in next?
Exactly. And I think that's one of the things I want to talk about is that, the remote work and digital nomadism thing that I'm seeing, it sounds like it fits perfectly with that. Have you seen an uptick in interest because of this trend where people sort of want to live somewhere beautiful for a month and then want to move and live somewhere else?
Yeah. So, I think the most we've seen of it is in Miami. A lot of New Yorkers went to Miami, whether it was because of COVID protocols being different in Florida or whether it was because they were tired of being in a tiny apartment and they could go to the beach. But we saw a tremendous number of New Yorkers, sign like month leases that just kept rolling in furnished turnkey apartments. They could, go right down to the water. We've seen less of it in other markets. We do a lot of interim housing. So as there's this prediction that this is the big, there's going to be a ton of resignations. And so we see a lot of people changing jobs. And as part of that, they're relocating to different cities. So we see a lot of relo folks that are with us for 30 or 90 days as they kind of figure out where they move. And then, I think the bigger trend that affects us on the work from anywhere is not necessarily the nomadic folks, because they're generally pretty price sensitive. Because normally you're at a stage in your life where you probably don't have kids. You can just pick up and go. And so generally that's younger people and they generally have less money, So, we don't see as much of that driving our returns. What we do see a lot more of is someone's company now lets them work remotely out of Denver. But they got to be in, DC or Miami for, a couple weeks a month as part of training, as part of team events. And so we see a ton of that kind of longer stay business traveler. Instead of the nightly stuff you used to see a lot of for business meetings, we just see a lot of training based, team building based stuff because these are apartments where that goes on for a week or two because someone's reload out of a, core market, but their company's based out of that market.
Interesting. I could certainly see where that would be popular in Washington, D.C. because so many people come in for training and things like that.
Yeah, and we saw the same thing in Seattle and in Houston in those markets as well. Where people in Seattle worked for Amazon and Amazon gave flexibility on remote work, but there's a lot of project-based work. And in Houston, we saw a lot of it where people will work in foreign countries in the oil fields, like in Venezuela. And then they got to be back in Houston for trainings and otherwise, as they're kind of layover between major international jobs.
Interesting. So is your client base, what proportion of it is corporate clients versus just individuals wanting the WhyHotel experience?
That's a good question. It really depends on the market. So like a leisure market like Miami, that's mostly individuals that is their personal decision. A corporate market like Northern Virginia and DC, that is predominantly corporate. That's probably 80% of our business is corporate there. And it probably goes the other way. In Miami, probably 60, 70% of our business is leisure. So it really depends on the market. And actually it also depends on the season. There are certain seasons where in cold markets where you just don't see a lot of travel, leisure travelers in the winter. You see business folks, and then vice versa. You don't see a lot of business folks in the summer. You see a lot of leisure. So it really depends on the market and the season.
So as you expand, is it more a question of finding the right partner first and a building that you want to be in, or is it more wanting to be in a particular city first and then finding the partner to match that?
I guess it depends. So there are certain partners we have a long-standing relationship that we would follow to new cities as part of opening cities. And then there's a number of cities that we just think are really strong long-term markets for us. At this point in time as a company, the limiting factor is just how quickly we can grow. I mean, we were on pace to open a pop-up a month in 2020. We pulled back a little bit because of COVID. You can only, as a young company, there's only so much inventory you can take on and kind of effectively and responsibly run. Right now, that's our biggest limiting factor is, how comfortable we are bringing on inventory at what pace. And so, yeah, if we have a really strong partnership, we would prioritize that. Or if there's markets that we're already in where we want to double or triple down, we prioritize that as well.
So are you sharing profits with the partners in the buildings? Are they getting a share of the rent and then you're getting a share of the rent?
Yeah, so they participate in the revenue we create. And that's great because it aligns them and us while we're there. And yeah, and that's how our deals are set up. We don't do the kind of master lease market rate model, which some short-term rental companies do that went under during the pandemic. Our focus is really on aligning us and our partners through the cycle. So, for the pandemic for us obviously was not, like any hospitality company, was not something that was enjoyable. Not that we're out of it, but travel has returned. But we kept about 85% occupancy, actually over 85% occupancy through COVID, which was kind of crazy. And it's because our product swung to long-term homes. And we had honest conversations with our partners. There's some stuff that we closed more quickly. Because we said, look, it's a revenue share. So if there's not enough revenue in these markets, we should push. And then other markets we did very well. And we said, it's a revenue share. We should continue to run these. This is a great interim home product for folks that are looking for accommodations during COVID.
Well, I can definitely understand why for travelers, there's been an interest more in Airbnbs, in having apartments, in being somewhere where you can cook so you don't have to worry about restaurants and mask restrictions and things like that. What are you thinking about the role of shared amenities? Does it matter if a building has a pool or a gym or something like that? Have you seen some of those amenities close and then reopen and maybe close again?
During COVID, amenities mattered less because generally people didn't want to share amenities with strangers. But coming out of COVID, yeah, in a leisure market, a pool is meaningful. In a corporate market, having a good gym is meaningful. And we haven't seen them close again. We saw a lot of stuff close early 2020. And then, some of it opened in the fall, but some of it didn't open until spring of 21. We haven't seen anything close in 21 yet. Although obviously with what's going on with the Delta variant, that could change. But honestly, the amenities are people want to use the amenities when they're open. If they're closed, it's probably because there's a health reason they're closed and they're probably going to be underutilized anyway. So that hasn't been an issue for us.
So you said the company is 4 years old. Why was this the right project for you? And what was your real estate journey in general?
So I used to build high-rise developments. I ran about $2 billion of developments before WhyHotel. And eventually I was an executive focused on innovation at a large real estate company. And it's exciting. I mean, it's exciting to be a part of the evolution of a $1 trillion asset class. And the reason I used to build buildings is because I got a high from the, being in the change business, and there's no bigger change business than changing industries. So me, my partner, and, a lot of our senior leadership, we all left large institutional roles, to go build a company that we think is on the right side of where real estate's going and where consumer preferences are going. We've been doing it for 4 years and it's a blast. And every year it feels like we're more right about where the world's going. It feels like the world isn't moving fast enough, but we're more right about where it's going. So, that's why I started the company with my business partner, Bao. And it's why 4 years in, we're still running after it and we're growing rapidly and, enjoying the journey.
So let's dive into some of those beliefs that you had in creating this business, because you were sort of creating something that didn't quite exist yet. And there are some other businesses that are sort of doing something similar, but not exactly. So how did you center on this idea specifically? Yeah,
so when you think about the kind of opportunities for high growth companies in real estate, there's really like three buckets. Bucket one is like software hardware that just makes it more efficient. And that's cool. And that's not us. Bucket two is marketplaces. Think about like an Airbnb, or think about like anywhere where you can, buy goods, lease goods, whatever else. That's also interesting. There's generally like a single winner or two in that. Of course, a tremendous amount of capital also was less exciting. And the third bucket is the space utilization, how people actually use physical spaces and how those spaces will evolve based on changing consumer trends and technology allowing them to be flexible. And to us, that's like a gold mine. And so there's a lot of different there's a lot of different ways that plays out. In the office world, office conference ring, there's a company called Convene, and that allows someone to rent office space and then flex into co-working and have these amenities. And in the apartment and hospitality space, clearly there was a consumer demand for furnished apartments. And clearly in a lot of markets, there's different income streams associated with that. And to us, it seemed like a really large opportunity to be able to create a flex platform that would allow inventory to exist across that spectrum of unfurnished 12-month to furnished nightly and everything in between. Our long-term view is that home, hospitality, work, and retail are all going to coexist in buildings and it'll be commingled in spaces. I mean, the fact that a lot of people do a lot of shopping on Amazon means that you are shopping from home and you're getting your deliveries at home. And the fact that the work from anywhere environments, a lot of people that work from home, I mean, it's not home anymore. Eventually, these just become buildings that are where you work and where you shop and where you stay and where you live. And we're at the early innings of that. Real estate forever has been this kind of single use inflexible assets. In the 90s, we had what architects called mixed use, which was really stacked use, right? You would just take one use and you'd plop it on the other. And that was like, earth shattering, right? That could you take Manhattan to Nashville, right? You could do this. It was different. And, to commingle uses is the next natural evolution, right? When you think about the highest utilization of an asset and you think about a set of customers that have gotten more and more comfortable being kind of an individual amongst the masses, right? People don't necessarily require the same kind of ownership they would have done a generation ago. And so whether that's businesses that are using co-working, or individuals where you live. And so that flexibility is going to be at the heart of new real estate for the next generation. And so we're starting with home and hotel and that intersection. But that really is the start. I mean, the commingled flexible real estate in urban markets is an inevitability. And so that's why we chose to take this journey. And that's how we spend all of our energy and time, whether it's on the software back-end tech build or the yield optimization pricing displacement tools. We live for this. This is really exciting for us.
I love that. I feel like space as a service is kind of where a lot of businesses have gone and trying to figure that out. The pandemic certainly shook up so much of that. So as you're putting together your business, it seems like you've got a lot of different components. You've got working with developers. You've got trying to compete against an Airbnb and hotels and all of that stuff. How do you manage all of those different components? And as you raise funds, how are you putting those funds to work?
Yeah, so the way we think about it is we have a single flex platform. And on that platform, there's a number of applications. One application is a pop-up hotel. One application is running an apartment building with hospitality services. One application is an apartment hotel. One application is having a mix of those uses within a building. But the backbone to it is all the exact same. So we use the exact same tech stack. We use the exact same pricing team, brand team, everything else. And so while it may sound complicated, it actually is just a single platform that we run each of these through. That's kind of the beauty of it, is that flexibility is inherent in our platform. It's not like we're having to build a dozen different products. And then it turns out that the real estate folks that are building buildings and owning buildings and lending against buildings are the same cast of characters. And so, it's not like we got to go make new friends on this side of the aisle, that side of the aisle. It's all the same folks. And then to our customers, it's all pretty similar too. So as a guest of WhyHotel, you don't know that necessarily that the building's not going to be there in 12 months or that it is going to be there in 12 months or, you're just there for the experience and the high quality product. I'd say every time we open a new market, that creates, we have to learn about it. We have to become part of the community. We have to hire local. So there's a big learning curve there. But the platform itself is a single platform designed to operate all those different instances.
What are you noticing in terms of building trends right now? I mean, we saw obviously during the pandemic, things stopped, starting to see some more development happening. What do you think is going to happen long term? Are you looking at major cities and secondary cities? Are you seeing building kind of shift a little bit?
So I think it depends on the food group. So multifamily building is now back at full tilt. Multifamily leasing is back at full tilt in urban markets. It's the secondary markets are building even faster than the primary, like the Phoenixes and the Austins and the Nashvilles. A lot of those are no tax states. So if you can work from anywhere, and there's plenty of people that are happy to live in a really enjoyable place and not pay state tax, although the property taxes are higher. But if you're a renter, that doesn't affect you. So I think you're seeing a lot of apartment development there. The hotel development is still lagging. There's some stuff that had broke ground pre-pandemic. I think that there's still there's a lot of excitement around it, but I think there's some question marks about what is RevPAR when you deliver. Some people are being really aggressive. That's cool. Others are, still sitting on the sidelines to see exactly how things play out. In the office world, you're not seeing much of any new office build without tenants pre-lined up. And there's a lot of questions about, what office looks like in 5 or 10 years. That means there's probably a lot of opportunity to reposition office buildings. We've seen office buildings, get listed as conversion to apartment or conversion to hotel. A lot of people thought hotels would convert to apartments during the pandemic. We did not see a lot of that. Yeah. So, it's a mix. It really depends on the city. It depends on the market. I think, like I said, office is probably on the worst end of the spectrum. Apartments probably on the easiest end, hotel somewhere in the middle. And then retail, there's the retail that's done really well is the kind of placemaking retail where you have a lot of it all in one place. And, the individual retail that's part of the urban fabric, depending on where it is, has been harder to tenant, and been harder to execute. But when you have, like a Ponce City Market or some of these places in the United States that are just like the epicenters of, retail and tourism, they've done very well. But, some of the retail that was required by zoning that's in secondary or tertiary streets that's off of a main corridor, some of those have struggled.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I'm keeping an eye on is central business districts in general because of that office issue. There was some hollowing out, and I think it's coming back, but it's definitely work in progress. So, last question for you: where do you see WhyHotel in 5 years? Is it just iterating on this model, or is it building out that platform more that to other aspects of real estate?
Yeah, so I think 5 years, we're probably still pretty dead set on hospitality and home. I think you're going to see us as a part of, tens of thousands, if not more, of units of new development where this is the highest and best use. You'll likely see us expand outside of the United States, although that's not something we've considered today. But 5 years for us is a lifetime. And yeah, I think that what you're going to find is that our product lines have just become kind of part and parcel for what it is to travel and stay in the United States across 30 plus major U.S. markets. And I think you're going to see a rethinking from the calcified kind of real estate community of this is how it's always been. I think you're going to see some cracks, and a lot more people move toward commingled flexible real estate, either because it's required by lenders or because the return profiles are so large. 2026 should be an interesting year.
I would absolutely agree with that. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Listeners, you can learn more at whyhotel.com. Thank you.
Good. Thanks for having me.